Welcome back to With the First Pick on this edition of The Perfect Fix. We're fixing the Las Vegas Raiders. Rand, I ain't going to lie. I was all in on old Pete Carroll there when he was hired. The track record, the positivity in the face of adversity, the ability to get the most out of his players. It felt like the exact reset this team needed. I can't imagine how it could have gone much worse. The team is currently 2-12 heading into week 16. They have the number 2 pick in the draft. And you could argue that this team has needs up and down the roster outside of names Max Crosby and Brock Bowers. Okay, so we're going to do it here. Let's talk about what went wrong, how easy or incredibly difficult it will be to fix. Going to break it all down, how Vegas got here, who stays, who goes, and just how many years into the future, and it could be quite a few, is this team from returning to the playoffs. First time since 2021. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former Titans GM Rand Carthon. Before we get going here, Raiders fans, let us know in the comments where you would start with the Raiders. What's the first step in this long journey to fix this mess? I read every comment, and I'll reply to a lot of them. So mix up in the comments and let us know. All right, Rand, a little segment we call Stay or Go. How did we get here? Is this another situation where owner Mark Davis perhaps leaned too heavily into part owner Tom Brady and his decision-making process in the front office? Tom Brady doesn't have any experience in the front office. He obviously is a Hall of Fame quarterback, now calls games for Fox. Is 74-year-old Pete Carroll the right guy, and do you stick with him? Because, again, he's 74 and things have gone sideways in a hurry this year. And then what's next? Give me some names you have in mind. If it's not Pete Carroll, is there an offensive coordinator you have in mind if Pete Carroll returns? Because Chip Kelly was fired midway through the season. There's just so many moving parts, and none of those moving parts seem to be working right now.
Yeah, so let's start here in terms of in addressing the Tom Brady piece of it. I know a lot was speculated about Tom Brady's involvement and how much he was going to factor into the decision making. Honestly, I don't know what to believe from that standpoint
Oh, that's
because it
not
was
good.
speculated a lot, but then we never heard Mark Davis say Tom Brady is going to lead this, or we never heard Tom Brady say he was going to lead this. Now, what was funny off of it is him and GM John Spytek, they played college ball together at the University of Michigan, and they were in Tampa Bay together. So I know there's some synergy and familiarity there. But here's where the Raiders have to start. And again, this is not an indictment on Tom Brady, but you have to decide what Tom Brady's role is going to be.
Right.
And if he's going to be involved, then he needs to be involved. And if he's not, then he needs to be the typical minority owner who has their investment, who, obviously they come around, they do what they do, but they're not a factor in the decision maker. I
Hey,
think
let me
that's
ask
the
you
first.
this. When you're talking about this sort of involvement, are you saying you can't tell Tom Brady what to do? He's a grown man. I need you to focus solely on this job and perhaps forget about the other stuff you're involved in, including calling games. I need you to be in the building, whatever, 2 days a week, 5 days a month, whatever it is, so we can
Well,
focus on this.
here's my thing. I mean, the deal that he has at the other network, like there's no way you can tell him he can't do that. Like that's
Right.
paying the bills, right? That's bringing in more money than his investment with the Raiders, if you're being honest about it. But the conversation needs to be, are you going to be involved? And if you're going to be involved, we need you from this time to this time. And this is what involvement entails. It entails you being here, you helping set the vision, you being a part of the vision, right? So all the events that Mark Davis is at, when I say events, things that are going on in the building in terms of meetings and all those things, he needs
Yep.
to be involved in. He would need to be involved in the end of the year conversation, and he would need to be involved in the evaluation of the organization, the roster, the coaching staff, the front office staff, even over on the business side. If you're going to be an owner, you need to take these things on and be an owner if you're going to be involved, because there are a lot of guys that are minority owners who use this as a passive investment, and they're on the masthead. We're part of ownership, but they're not involved
Right.
in the day-to-day operations of the team. So they need to figure out his role. Let's start there. And then the next big question, and you talked about it, is where do we go with Pete Carroll? Now, here's the trick. He's, like you mentioned, he fired Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, who was the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league, was Probably, if you're being honest about it, he was making first-year head coach money as the
Oh,
offensive coordinator. Um, and then you fire special teams coordinator Tom McMahon. Now you inherited Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator, which Patrick Graham is a good defensive coordinator. Probably needs more Jimmys and Joes as opposed to retooling the X's and O's part of it. But here's the it's always you can always tell where a team is in trouble or a coach is in trouble is when you fire multiple coordinators in a season. And typically that doesn't bode well for you, or you've made multiple changes at a coordinator spot throughout your tenure. That usually doesn't bode well for you. Now, I believe that they're going to move forward with Pete Carroll. And I look at it from a cash perspective. If you're owner Mark Davis, I don't know what Josh McDaniels' deal is, but you're probably still paying Josh McDaniels.
sweet.
You're paying Antonio Pierce, and I don't know where the lawsuit with John Gruden is, but you're paying that, and you're still paying Pete Carroll. That's four head coaches
Sweet
that
Jesus,
you're
man. Come on.
paying, let's say, north of 6 or 7 million a year to. And we know where John Gruden's deal was. We know Josh McDaniels was highly coveted, so I'm sure his number was fairly high. Pete Carroll and his pedigree, who will arguably be a Hall of Fame coach when it's all said and done. We know what that number's north of. At least you can say with Antonio Pierce, he probably got first-time head coach money. That is still a ton of money to be out to coach to just the head coach position. We're
Right.
not even talking about the coaching staff, the support staff, and what you're probably paying those guys to no longer be there. So to me, the Tom Brady question, involvement, and what do we do with Pete Carroll are going to be the top two questions that you have there. I don't foresee them moving on from GM John Spytek. So the rest of that, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit more. You got 10 total draft picks. You got 116 million in cap space, which is third most in the league. And it's Vegas. Guys are going to come
Right.
play in Vegas. No state tax. That's always great. And so guys will want to come there. And I think that's going to be John Spytek thing. But the Tom Brady question and the Pete Carroll question are going to be the two questions that you have to answer before you set any type of plan to move forward with.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's going to have to be a marriage of convenience given the financials involved with Pete Carroll, especially. So I'm actually curious what Raiders fans think. In make believe land, you can just fire everybody and start over. But hearing what Rand just said and all the money you're already paying to three other head coaches that you fired in recent years, what do you think should happen with Pete Carroll? Are you just want to eat it and, pay the next coach $500,000 a year and figure it out 5 years from now? Or are you going to have to roll with Pete Carroll and make it work? Because I think everyone thought Pete Carroll was a good hire at the time. It's just been way worse than we all expected. All right, let's take a little peek under the hood here at the roster. As always, to lean on Rand's front office experience. I'm going to set the table here and what's your thoughts. Hey, some good news. You talked about it, Rand. They're 116 million under the cap. That's awesome. Players whose contracts expire after the season, some noteworthy ones. I want to get your thoughts on any of these names that stick out to you in terms of guys you might want to bring back. Edge rusher Malcolm Kuntz, Kenny Pickett, who didn't do too well in his debut in Week 15 after Geno got hurt. Eric Stokes, the former first-round pick of Green Bay, continues to battle injuries and inconsistency at quarterback. Landon Roberts, Tyler Lockett, Jamal Adams, Stone Forsythe, who's had to play because of injuries and has been exposed at times, for being frank. Veteran linebacker Devin White, Thomas Booker, and then Charles Snowden, former UVA day 3 pick.
So
Any of those names stick out to you?
First of all, let me say you were biased. You left the specialists off. You left kicker Daniel Carlson off, and Jacob Bobenmoyer, the long
100%
snapper.
biased.
You left those guys off. Don't treat the specialists like that. But
Okay.
honestly, the one name that stood out to me the most, not saying that others didn't, Dylan Parham,
Yeah, didn't mention him.
the
Okay.
guard. His name stood out. I think he was a third round draft pick, obviously by a previous regime. He's been there as a starter. He's been, in the lineup consistently. He's a guy, especially with this cap space, I'm pretty sure they'll be in conversations about bringing him back. Now that guard number is creeping up there, man. Some of the highest paid guards are all, north of 20 million a year. So that'll be tricky there. So from a free agent perspective, I don't foresee them bringing back Eric Stokes, especially at a high number. I don't see that happening. Landon Roberts, he's been a good, solid veteran presence. You know what you're going to get out of him. He's a culture guy. He is a purveyor of the message, and he's like a captain type. But you're not getting playmaking splash plays that you want. And so I think they'll look around and then come back to him, in the event. Now that's particularly if they keep Patrick Graham as the defensive coordinator.
Yep.
If they decide to move on, which I'll be interested to see if Pete Carroll would want to get back to his Seattle defense, the defense he ran at USC, because that defense to me would be better for young guys. What Patrick Graham does,
And that's just cover three, get after it defense.
Yeah, that's that cover three, that match three. It evolved. You played a little bit more man, some quarters here and there, but it eventually evolved where it was a 4-3 defense, but it had 3-4 principles. Because you had that superhero Sam linebacker that could play off the ball, that could set the edge, rush the passer, drop in coverage, and that was essentially your 3-4 outside linebacker type. But over time, Pete Carroll evolved it and started running. It gave you more of an underfront look, basically. And then it evolved to where you started running a little bit more of an overfront, playing the guy off ball, and whoever your third best linebacker was, that was your Sam linebacker. So, but I say all that to say that defense was young guy friendly because you could play a ton of young guys. If you go back to their drafts that they had in Seattle, it was one point the highest drafted player in their secondary was Earl Thomas, obviously an elite player. He was a first-round pick, but his running mate Cam Chancellor was a fifth-round pick. You had Richard Sherman was a fifth-round pick. Brandon Browner was an undrafted guy that they signed from the CFL. And so they were able to get all these pieces later on day 3 of the draft, and you didn't have to expend money in free agency to go get a ton of guys. You have for a while there in Seattle, they never spent a ton of money in free agency. They would just they drafted really well. So I'd be interested to see if he moves on from Patrick Graham to want to get back to his defense, because again, it gives you more leeway to play some of these young guys. And you and I talked about it off camera, the 2025 draft class. It was 10 picks in that entire draft class, and you only got 2 starters, only produced 2 starters that you hadn't got a ton of production out of in and of itself. But you have guys, Darian Porter, that was a 3rd-round pick at corner. Guys like that. Charles Grant, where's his development going to go? Tonka Hemingway, a guy that you took in the 4th round. JJ Pegues, another guy that you took in the 6th round. Typically in a Pete Carroll system, you've gotten production out of all those guys.
That's a good point.
Right. And now, and I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, but you're going into a draft where now you have 10 draft picks this year. And so for, if you're the GM there, you're coming, and let's just say they stay at 10 picks. Now in your 2 draft classes, you've drafted 20 guys.
And you got to
find some. You've got to find some starters in there to kind of bring up the back end of this roster. And those day 3 guys got to kind of help round out that depth. But again, I know I got ahead of myself. I want to go back to one thing. I want to just make sure I let our viewers and our listeners know about the cap space. They have 116 million in cap space. Like we said, was 3rd most in the league. But you have to be aware of cap versus cash. Right. So the cap is the hard number that the league sets, that whatever I don't even know what it is this year, but here's the most that you could spend on the team. Right. And so they have 116 million to get to that point. However, the ownership and the financials of the organization will set how much cash that you can actually spend out. And the cash of that is how much of that 116 is going to be paid out no matter what over the course of the year. And so sometimes, and I don't know where the Raiders financials are, but the owner just may not have 116 million in cash to just give out that year.
Right.
So although they have 116 million, they may set a hard cash budget at, let's just say, 70 million, 75.
So just to be clear, this sounds like you can go to the bank and they'll give you $500,000 loan, for the house. But if you, in terms of paying it back, if you only have $200,000, you might not want to take that $500,000 loan in terms of your ability to pay it back because that's all
Yeah.
you got sitting in the bank.
Yeah, it's like that's the perfect way to do it. It's a credit card, right? And hey, I'm just hoping to get a limit of 10,000 on this on this credit
Yeah.
card, and you come back like, oh no, you qualify for 100,000, and
Like,
you're
listen,
like,
you ain't listening.
nah, I just need 10. I appreciate it, but I just need 10 because
Right.
this is what I could afford. So again, that'll be another conversation. GM, head coach, minority owner, majority owner.
Yeah.
That's a budgetary conversation that will need to be had. How much money are we going to actually be able to spend to fix this roster?
And that's important because I know fans and even media folks get angry about the way things are going or have opinions about the way things are going. But when you dig into the details, that's what matters. So you talk about things like you're paying 4 head coaches already. Can you afford to fire the 4th one and still pay everyone who's none of them on the payroll? When you don't have the cash in your pocket, even though the credit card is willing to extend you, it doesn't matter. You can't fix things that aren't broke. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw some names at you as free agents they could potentially sign from other teams in the offseason, guys whose contracts are going to be up, and we don't know what their future is going to be with their current teams, but we can go through that. Just give me like 10 seconds on each guy. Start at the top. I think at the end of the day, the Raiders are going to have the first overall pick because of their schedule and the what Vegas thinks about it. The bookmakers, not the team. All right, here we go. 28-year-old Daniel Jones. Would you dip your toe in that pool?
They're not, because that number is going to cost them. In order to get him out of Indy, that number is going to cost them north of 45, and I don't see them
And the
spending
Achilles.
that. And the injury.
All right, 29-year-old Deebo Samuel.
That would be a conversation for them if they could get it at the right number. I'm sure Debo would love to be in Vegas, but I think that would give them a conversation.
All right, edge rusher, either Joey Bosa, who's 30, or Trey Henderson, who's 31.
Yeah, you gotta target those. Now, no, I'll say no. And the reason why I'm gonna go back and say no, because you're already paying Max Crosby a really high number, and then to pay the other side of that, that really restricts you in terms of how you're going to be able to pay everybody else.
And finally, defensive lineman, John Franklin Myers is 29. He's played for the Jets and played for the Broncos. And DJ Wanham's 28.
DJ Wanham would be more of a conversation. I think the way John Franklin Myers has played this year, his number is going to be pretty high.
Yeah.
But I think DJ Wanham would be worth the conversation. Again, the trick part is where do they go, right? Because if you keep Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator, your defense is going to be heavy veteran just because of the complexity of the defense. It's not going to be young guy friendly. So you're going to have to pay more on the defensive side of the ball, which means you're going to have to draft more and play more younger guys on the offensive side.
Hey, Raiders fans, let us know in the comments which free agents, either currently on the roster or ones that are on other teams that are going to be free agents in 2026, would you like to see this offseason, given the constraints we've talked about here in the real world? Or you can just say whoever you want, and I'll read the comments either way. Randy, you talked about it. They have 10 draft picks. They had 10 last year. They haven't hit on them yet. And look, I'll be honest. I think you and I both like that draft class in 2025. They just got to figure out ways to get Ashton Genty going, to get the young receivers going. Here's the class here. Darian Porter's been playing a little bit. Long cornerback out of Iowa State, former wide receiver. And then some of those day 3 guys need to hit a little bit. My guy, Charles Grant out of William & Mary. This has been a redshirt year for him. So you want to see where he is. But I would imagine if they have the first overall pick, they're currently picking 2 as we head into week 16. It's Fernando Mendoza, and we're just moving on.
Yeah, but I mean, you're still married to Geno's number for next year.
Listen, man, I understand we're paying all these guys, but we're just doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result.
I'm just saying you take your quarterback because Geno is not going to be the future.
Right. Okay.
But you gotta. But again, that could potentially create some cap space for you. But see, these are the things that, like, when you first come in and you make commitments at certain positions, that ultimately come back to bite you in the ass a little bit later. Right. Now, nobody would have foresaw themselves being 2-12 at this point, or whatever the case may be. But you trade for Geno, and then you extend Geno. You didn't have to extend Geno. You could have just traded for him, let the year play out and see what it was. but you extended him, and then now you're carrying that number over for another year, and then you're sitting at number one, number two, with the understanding that you still need a quarterback. And so it becomes a situation like the Falcons. You pay Kirk Cousins, and then you draft Michael Penix in the top 10 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But you have two quarterbacks that that if one goes down, the other one can step in and play.
Yep. And Aiden O'Connell's still on the roster. I think he's still got a few, at least a couple more years left in his rookie deal. He's been hurt all year. Kenny Pickett's contract's up. All right, let's move on to a segment we do for every perfect fix. Let's hear the drop here, Striker, because it's almost comedy at this point. What do you got?
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs?
All right, let's talk about playoffs for the Raiders. It sounds like a crazy thing to say, and I don't necessarily mean in 2026. But this team feels like they couldn't be farther away from the playoffs right now. But is there a blueprint? 10 draft picks in 2025, the 10 draft picks in 2026. Can this be the 2023 Texans, the 2024 Commanders, where the 23 Texans drafted CJ Stroud and Will Anderson? Next year, the Commanders got Jaden Daniels. Both those teams went to the playoffs, won playoff games. Is there any world where this could be a situation? Or are we looking at a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year turnaround?
There's a blueprint that Pete Carroll has that he's implemented in Seattle that allowed that place to turn around quick. I don't see that in the Raiders right now. Again, and that's why I asked about where he's going to go with the defensive coordinator, right? If he's there, because again, you have Patrick Graham, who I think is a fantastic coach. I really do. I think he's a fantastic coach. But again, if you have him as your defensive coordinator, the complexity of the defense is more veteran heavy, which means whoever your next offensive coordinator is going to have to run a system that's friendly for young guys to be able to play and eliminate the thinking and excel in. And so I would have loved to see Pete Carroll bring his blueprint from Seattle, which that first year in Seattle, him and John Schneider had over 200 transactions just in terms of flipping the roster till they found the right fix. And then we saw what that place became. So he had it. I don't see it in Raiders land. And so for right now, for that reason, I think they're a little bit further away to becoming a playoff team.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. Again, one player can sometimes change your fortune. So one last thing I'll ask Raiders fans, who is the starting quarterback in 2026? Number one. Number two, do you want Fernando Mendoza? Should he be available, or should you be picking first overall? Because I think that's going to set the course of this franchise going forward. All right, thanks as always.
I think the better question.
Oh, yeah.
I think the better question, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
Is if Raiders fans, if you're stuck at number 2, who do you want?
Dante Moore.
Is it Dante Moore? Is it Arvell Reese? Is it Peter Woods? Who do you want?
Right.
Let us know. Drop it in the comments. Let us know who do you want as Raiders fans if you're stuck at number 2.
All right. Thanks as always for joining us. I know this is a tough one if you're a Raiders fan, but hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Hit that subscribe button if you don't mind, and check back often because we'll be fixing every single team that misses the playoffs. We'll catch you guys in the next one.